Hello and welcome to Shedcast, the latest show from Garblag Games. I'm your host Pete, here to talk to you about all things role-playing, board games and war games. So, last time on Shedcast we had a zombie special, which was a lot of fun. We talked about a couple of zombie board games and some war games coming up in the future. And we had a little competition. There was a £10 voucher code up for grabs. All you had to do was comment on the video. We've had nearly 100 views of the video in the last few days, which is great, and in general we've had nearly 400 views of our channel in the last couple of weeks, which is really pleasing. It's really nice to see that people are watching. Gives me the drive to keep making these shows if people are watching it. It's humble beginnings, but let's hope it goes somewhere. So back to the competition. We had a winner, Gaming Knights, who commented on the video that he would like to start a new German army so that if a friend came around he'd have an army for them to learn how to play, which I thought was a really good sentiment. And generally a lot of positive comments from people, a lot of people looking for bolt action hardware, which is cool, you know, making those games a bit more explosive. Which is what we always want when you're doing a World War II game. So yes, last week was all about board games and war games, and before I move on to what we're going to talk about this week, I just wanted to share our contact information. So hopefully that gave you what you need to email us, contact us, if in doubt, pete@garblaggames.co.uk will get through to me. Please give us any feedback you have on the videos, anything you want to discuss, any comments, and we're happy to engage. We want to talk to people, we want to make this a show for you. So last time we talked, as I said, about board games. This time I want to talk about role-playing. It's what I suppose is really my true deep down passion, something I've been doing for years, something that's helped me get through the humdrum of the everyday at the office, that kind of thing. And specifically I wanted to talk to you about character creation for a campaign. So what we want to talk about, character creation for a campaign. Now this is a two-way street really. And before I start, I should just say this is not about one-shots or con games where you've got 4 hours. It's not about pre-gen characters, guidelines for GMs on how to make pre-gen characters, although I'm sure you could take some of the information and use it there. This is about, you want to sit down with your friends and start a campaign. You've got an idea in mind, or you've got a group of people who are bugging you to run a game for them because you're a good GM. And you're just thinking, how do we go about getting people together? How do we tackle characters? Not rolling dice, not necessarily talking about the rolling of the dice or the spending of your points. This is more about the stuff behind that. So this really, I was thinking about how to approach this, and at the St Albans Role Playing Club, where we've got an interesting setup where every 12 weeks, give or take, we'll start a new set of games, and all of the DMs, GMs, storytellers, etc., who want to run a game will actually pitch their game, a little elevator speech to tell all of the people who want to play in games for that cycle what their game's about, what the big thing is, what the quest is, what the mission is, that kind of thing. And that's really, it's a really interesting start that we put on for each of these cycles, as we call them. Now not everyone has that kind of setup, and even that, although it's kind of preempting, there can be difficulties in character creation. Now really I think the DM, I'm just going to say DM for just to get through that right now. Currently I'm playing Dungeons & Dragons 5e, as you may have seen on the Pub Play videos, which there are links to below. But just clear up the whole DM thing. DM, GM, whatever you want to call it. But we'll go with DM today. Normally I say GM, but I'll go with DM, it's in my head. So it's not just down to the player who's creating their character, it's also down to their DM to give them some information. And I think really you can kind of come at this from the DM perspective and the player perspective, and then how you bring that all together and how it kind of links in at the end. So that's what I wanted to talk about a little bit. So I just wanted to talk about the DM perspective first. So I think there are kind of three main areas that I want to talk about. The first one is, what angle are you approaching this from? As in, do you already have a goal, a mission, a quest in mind? As I said at the club, a lot of people have a very specific idea of what they want the 12 weeks to at least start with, and an idea of where it might go. And you can kind of pitch that. However, that's not always the case. You may be doing a sandbox game, in which case you're kind of going to throw out a world and see what sticks, and see what the players are interested in, where they want to go, what they want to do. Now these are two different angles that you can approach it from. So if you are a DM who has a really good idea for a mission or a goal, my first slight aside from character creation is, don't be too fixed to that, because players always change things. But that's a different issue, and we'll talk about that another time. What you should do is really make that clear at the beginning. You know, there is a grand quest. The king has summoned everyone to the hall because he needs champions to go out, or there's a trade run to a Hutt planet in the Star Wars universe. You know, give that up front so that the players have an idea of what they're facing. If you're doing a sandbox game, you really need to sort of give them a bit more flavour of the world, the setting. If you've got a very specific goal or mission or quest, you should make it very clear to the players that their character should have something that makes them eligible for this, or some reason, some debt that they have, you know, some reason to be on this mission. You know, maybe don't necessarily spell out specific classes or skills or attributes that you want to see, but you may want to say, oh, you know, and they're looking for people who are good in the wilderness, or they're looking for a crew who can handle a small ship together, you know, that has all the requisite skills, so that each player knows, okay, I need to have something to do, so that I can look at that, but then I'm free to look at other things. I think that's really good to lay out if you have this kind of mission from the beginning. If you've got a sandbox game, you're in for a world of pain, but it's a lot of fun, and some of them are the really good adventures. Throwing it out to the players, you know, slamming the player's handbook down or GURPS or whatever, and saying, create some standard characters. You know, and we'll just start from dot. You know, that can be interesting. I think in that way you want to try and get the players to work together in creating their characters, and we'll come on to players making their characters a bit later. So I think in both cases it's very important then to come on to the next point, to provide campaign and setting specifics. A lot of people know things like Star Wars, and they know Dungeons and Dragons, and they know Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and other strangeness. You know, there are a lot of popular culture settings out there, but there are also some that aren't. And even when you're doing something like Star Wars, what era are you setting it in? Is it immediately after the latest film Force Awakens, or is it in the Old Republic era? People may have seen the films, they may even read one of the comics or a couple of the books, but they don't know all the ins and outs of every era of a well-known setting. So it's often good to lay down for the characters, you know, what's going on. Is this a standard game, or is there something that you've homebrewed, you've changed something? You know, a short, brief description on differences to a well-known IP can really help players go, oh, okay, so this is set on Nar Shaddaa. Now I don't know Nar Shaddaa, but the DM has given me a little paragraph about what that planet's like, and the rest of Star Wars I get, for example. If, however, you're kind of throwing out a new game or an old game that no one's really played before, it's good to sit them down maybe at the beginning of the character creation session, which I advise you do all together, by the way, and really go through what the world's about. I recently ran a Dark Sun game at the club, and you know, several of the players didn't know much about Dark Sun. They'd heard about it and they'd been told it was like Mad Max meets Dungeons and Dragons, which is a pretty good approximation. But I took the time to kind of sit down with them. I wrote up some notes. I was doing a bit of a conversion to Pathfinder, so I had found some resources online about races and classes, and I tweaked them and adjusted them, provided that to the players a couple of weeks beforehand, and then we really talked through, you know, what the world was like, how harsh it was, the kind of specific flavour pieces that made it go, you know, askew from regular Dungeons and Dragons. If you're that guy who's got 50 books on the shelf and you've been itching to run, you know, one of these games forever, like Deadlands, Hell on Earth, great game, very cool. Is it the new Savage Worlds version, or is it the pre-Savage Worlds version? Who knows? The players may not know, so you need to go and sit down with them and say, right, this is not only the system, which obviously players need to know, and we're not really talking about system now because we can get into system, that was a whole topic on its own, but the setting, the flavour, that mood that you will want to try and, you know, get out in your game, very key. It also gives players a real tool in creating their backstory. When that person comes to say, oh, where am I from, they've got some places that they can come from and some things they might have been doing. So the third thing I would recommend to GMs is to think about what kind of game you're aiming for. Now, you can take this two ways. You can say, I want to run this kind of game, or you can sit down with your players when they sit around that table and you've just told them all that setting thing. You can say, right, what kind of game, bearing all that in mind, do you want to play? Do you want combat? Do you want intrigue, politics, social engagements, all those kinds of things? What kind of game do you want to play? Is this a grand epic? Or is this just the first mission in a series of adventures of a crew of a starship who are going around hodgepodge bandit type, trying to make their way amongst the stars? It's really interesting, you know, talking through those kind of things with the players can really give you some ideas as to what kind of characters they want to play as well, and that's really interesting. So I would suggest that as a DM, you really engage with the players beforehand. If you can give them some images, short paragraph or two, details on the setting and the world, even if it's Dungeons and Dragons, what's the city you're going to start it in, or, you know, who's the king that's called the quest, etc. Because that really then feeds into how the player will start to build their character. So let's move on to from the player perspective. So from the player perspective, I'm not going to talk about dice, I'm not going to talk about spending points. We'll talk about skills and things a little bit, and what you're good at, but really I like to think, what's my character going to do? What is their focus going to be? What's their specialty? What's their motivation for behind it, and what's their story? So each of these things is very interesting. So, you know, you're playing Dungeons and Dragons and you say, I want to be a fighter, and the DM says, well, why are you a fighter? And, oh, I don't know, hang on, was I conscripted into an army? Am I a ruthless mercenary who goes out and murders people for money? Am I, you know, a swordsman who's making his way by dueling people and challenging stupid nobles to, you know, to a fight? It's interesting. You can, even such a simple thing as your class can help you flesh out. Obviously it gives you an idea of your background, They're going to help to flesh out. If you start to say why, not just I'm a fighter, I'm good with a sword, I can use armor, I trained, I'm good. Why are you good? What drove you to be a fighter? What drove you to be a scoundrel in the Star Wars galaxy? You know, all of these things it can throw into the pot. My biggest one for players, I think, is kind of the motivation. Why are you adventuring? What are you trying to achieve? Are you out for revenge and bloodlust? Are you being paid to do it? Is there some goal? You know, has the disappointment of your family always led you to try and run away, or push hard and adapt and achieve? You know, what is pushing your character forward? Many systems have little mechanics that throw ideas at you. Some of them are very specific, and they give you, you know, choices that you have to make. The new Dungeons and Dragons, from recent experience with 5e, with the backgrounds that they've added in, which I think are a really good addition to Dungeons and Dragons, they throw in little things. What's your flaw? What's your bond? You know, what add a little depth to your character. You know, embrace this. You know, if it's in there, you know, use it, and talk to your DM about, you know, can I take this? Does this tie in with being this class or this aspect or whatever? Don't create your character in isolation. That's kind of important. Talk to your other players. You know, is one of the others interested in money and your character's interested in money? Well, hang on, maybe you're both mercenaries. They may be a warlock and you might be a fighter, but you may have been recruited through the same mercenary company, and hey, we know each other. There you go, we've got a link. That's cool. How do we build on that story? Where have we been? You know, that's interesting. So also from motivation, I would say, what is your character not good at? What is your flaw? A lot of players don't want to have a flaw. They see it as, you know, and this can be fine for short-term games or one-shots, that kind of thing. My character's a great fighter. He's stacked. He's muscular. He's, you know, he's got all the stats in the right place. There's no flaws, no negative modifiers, whatever. Is that interesting? Is it not good to have some sort of flaw? I loved playing characters who had like a really low score in AD&D 2nd edition, just to have something to kind of riff off, you know, like a little point to try and roleplay. Why is he incredibly weak, even though he's a ranger? What's going on there? You know, and also that can reflect in your skills. Just because you don't take a skill doesn't mean that that skill can't influence your character. You don't put any points in swim. Well, that's fine. Maybe your character's scared of water, and maybe that starts to influence your character. You had an opportunity to go and sail off to a foreign training academy to learn new skills. Didn't take it. Who knows? You don't have the gambling skill. That's fine. You could still be a gambler. You just lose all your money. And it's a howler of a poker player. He may think, oh yeah, I love gambling, but he's just got no skill in it. Things like that. Just because something doesn't have anything in it doesn't mean you can't take it and add it into your character. You know, I wouldn't suggest trying to do that with every skill that you don't have points in. God, if you did that for GURPS, you'd be, you know, that would take you a year. But think about it, flip it round. You know, I've got all this stuff and I'm good at that, but this stuff I don't have and I'm not good at that. And why is my character not good at that? Why did he never learn to ride a horse? Maybe a member of a family was kicked by a horse and he saw it when he was young, and it's been a traumatic experience, and now he never wants to get on a horse. That kind of thing. Have a you know, think about how you can flip those things around. I would suggest only one or two things like that, but it can add a bit of interesting flavour to a character. And then this all kind of builds up together to build your backstory. Now, hopefully, your DM has given you a bit of idea about the world, a bit about the mission that you're doing, and then you're starting to piece together your character and saying, I'm good at this, I'm not good at that, I come from here, hang on, there's a war going on over there. This all comes together. My character was in the war. He was conscripted as a soldier, and he's been forced to go across land, but I've never learned to swim, so I'm scared of water. I don't want to go near any body of water, but I'm a strong warrior and I learned how to do it. But I don't really like fighting. It's horrible. You know, there's blood. There's, you know, it's just violent. You know, you can start to build up quite quickly an idea of something a bit interesting. And if your DM has given you enough little details at the beginning, you can kind of seed those in. And if he can give you some names and places, you can almost do a, he went to insert place name here and fought insert person name here. Don't do that all the way through your backstory. But then your DM you could work with to kind of flesh that out. And then he can give you some information about the world and say, oh, hang on, actually, you've travelled across the land during this war, so you'll know a bit about all these countries, which is good for me as a DM, because that means I can feed you some information, and you are like a little seed for me now to hook into, you know. Or you've got some great rival, you know, that you've formed over the years through gambling or various other means. You know, this person can become a tool for the DM. So backstory is really interesting. It's really good. Helps you flesh out your character a bit more, give a bit of flavour to it. Gives you something to call on as well when you're role playing. You know, when you're in those situations and you're the warrior in the dungeon and suddenly you come into a room and it's filled with a pool of water. He's petrified, you know, and he's terrified. And you can really get into that and really play that. I think that's quite interesting. So these elements from the DM giving you information, prepping you and working with you on what kind of game you want to play, you then saying, right, I'm good at this, I'm not good at this, what does that mean? How does this all tie together? What's my class, what's my skills, what's my aspect, whatever. Let's pull all that together and work together to create a character. Now that's talking just DM to player. Now what I think is very important is that you get everyone in the room for some of the time that you're creating characters. Now obviously some people will want to have a secret. They want to have a secret identity, something they did in their past. There's a dark thing in their soul that they haven't told anyone about. That's fine. If you want to do that, take the DM aside or talk to them at a time when it's not obvious and say, you know, I was thinking about being a traitor who betrayed a load of people and now I'm trying to make up for it. That kind of thing. But generally, I think when you're talking about your character capabilities and skills, generally, you should have some session where you're all working together, because it can really help the DM to understand and balance out the capabilities of a party. I'm not saying let's try and fudge things so we have one of each class or someone with every skill, because you don't want to do that. You want to have some flavour. It's interesting when there are holes. You know, we haven't got a healer. Oh my god, what are we going to do? Well, we've got to go and find potions every time we go on a mission. Right, so we go and buy lots of potions. Someone's found out that we're buying up all the healing potions and they're wondering why we're doing that. The DM can play off these things. And this is why it's interesting for all of the players to be present for some of the time that you're creating characters. Generally, it's good to do that if you have to roll dice, so everyone can witness what everyone else does, and there's no turning up to a session and looking at someone's character sheet and saying, hey, you've got an 18 in that and a 16 and a 15, what's going on? I don't believe that you know, all that kind of stuff. It helps with that, but also it helps with forming a bond. As I said earlier, if two of you have something similar in your backstory, you can turn that into a link, and then your DM doesn't have to have you all meet in a tavern, which we've all experienced several times. It's fun, you know, you can laugh at the cliche, but you really want to push how these people come together and the bonds that they form and the things that they could potentially know about each other that would make the party become even stronger. Because let's face it, a lot of the time we're talking about a band of heroes, or the people who are fighting against the odds, or they are going on some sort of quest. It's rarer that you have evil parties or people trying to destroy things necessarily. That happens. I'm not naive. I get that happens, and I've run an evil game and that was hell. But generally the goal is that these people journey together and they form together to become a solidified party who can take on anything that comes in their way. So bringing it all together I mean quite literally. Bring everyone together. Have a session where you all make some part of your characters together, or talk about the things that you're willing to share about each of the characters. I think that's really important. Just to talk about DM and player comparison again. I think the DM, therefore, it's very important for you to support the players in the creation of your character. Who they are, what's going on, what fuel can you give to those people that will allow them to say, oh, that town sounds really interesting, or that event, my ancestor was part of that. You know, help fuel the fire of character creation. And if a player gives you a juicy backstory, then take advantage of it. Tear pieces out of it, use it in your adventure, and go to town. Because if someone throws up, I've got a really bad rival who's out for my blood, that guy should turn up in the game. He should be in there. Players, be flexible on adjusting some of the tiny details of your character backstory. Don't run off and create some kind of warlord character who's just first level. You know, a lot of these times you're creating beginning characters. Remember that when you create your backstory. Don't have them a hero already, unless your DM said you're, starting as advanced characters. But also be adaptable so that things can fit to the DM's setting and to the other players. You know, if 3 people turn up to the table and all say, I want to be the heavy guy with the massive machine gun and grenades, and you've got 3 of those guys, you know where it's going. And also, at some point, at least one of those guys is going to feel redundant and bored. So in the best interest of your kind of party working together, your players staying interested and having relevance to the story, I think all of these things work together, especially if your players are new to the system. Really try to address that. If they're new to the system, if they're new to the setting, you're going to need to help them a bit more. It's difficult when you have someone who knows a setting extremely well and someone who's never seen it before, because this person will give you reams of stuff, loads of backstory, fill loads of things out, whereas the other person won't know where to start. So you need to address that balance and maybe say, I just want 500 words or 250 words, whatever you want to go for, like a page. There you go. A paragraph even, that's fine. Something in there. That's really cool. So I would say work together to make characters that will get involved in the story and have some reason to be working together towards the goal. They don't have to be friends. You can get some really good bits where people are arguing about things, they don't agree with each other, but they're on the same mission. They have a cause that is greater than their differences, that they are willing to put them aside for the time being to focus on something. But they shouldn't be forgotten. They should be tweaked by the DM just to make them feel slightly uncomfortable as they're going towards that mission. Some of the best story hooks come from a character's background. I think this is one of my top tips for DMs. Not only do they make the whole world kind of link together, because sometimes it can feel that the DM's created a world and there's a barrier, and you guys are playing characters who've just shown up, and there's no history to them. They don't feel like real people. If you can do this process where you all work together, DM, player, all together, you can really start to have a feel of a character that is not just a first level character. He's got a story. It may not be a hero story, not yet, but how do you take that introduction to his world and then take it forward so that he becomes a hero? That's quite interesting. I think that's where kind of the role-playing really gets in there, and you can really start to kind of push things, test things, and ultimately I think I really like a campaign where I can literally sit back for 20 minutes and the players will all roleplay full on in character, setting up camp, and they are discussing and arguing the events of the previous day. It's not pointless role playing, it's building their characters. They're discussing what's going on in the game. They're linking it back to their character backstory. You know, the reason I hated that guy was because I was a slave in my past life and no one's ever going to put me in chains. Whatever. You know, these things, when that happens, that's, to me, that's brilliant. You know, I've had that recently with my my Planescape team. And you know, I had a session where they roleplay for 20 minutes building a campfire, and I was just amazed. It was brilliant. I gave them all inspiration die for it because it was proper role playing, and I think they got a lot out of that. They kind of embodied their characters a bit more, and really started to know how the other players would start to react to certain situations, which can help them and hinder them, which is quite interesting. I think that really that's kind of my overview of character creation. There's kind of key things, you know, that for the GM, what angle are you taking? Is there a defined mission to begin with? Is there a grand quest, or is it a sandbox game? And somewhere in between. The campaign and setting specifics that allow you to provide the detail to the players to say, this is how it's different from what you've seen before, or this is how I'm going to change things going forward, and this is where we're going to start, and these are kind of the interesting things about that. And then what kind of game are you going for? Is that going to be dictated by the players, or are you going to say, I've really wanted to run this political intrigue game for ages, and I want to get you guys in on it, so let's try and make some characters that are based on that. All of those things for DMs. For players, what do you want to be good at, and why is that? Why is the character good at that? Not just I'm a fighter and I'm good at it because I've got a high strength. I'm a fighter because. Therefore, lead into motivation. Therefore, why are you adventuring? What's going on? Are you being paid? Are you doing what? And you know, what are you not good at? How can you turn that on its head and add that into your character without scuppering yourself, but whilst adding to your character? I think that's really interesting. And then from all of those things, from the DM's information, build your backstory, put that all together, work with the other people in your team to figure out how the things slot together, because if you can form some of those initial links, the DM's job is easier but more interesting as well. DMs support your players. I personally can never say, right, go and create a character, turn up next week, we'll start playing. I don't like that. Not only do I have a feeling that I'm doing them a disservice, but also I want to be able to contribute to those characters. They need to be interesting for me as well. You know, they've got to be fitting, they've got to be exciting. You know, the DM is a player of sorts. And players, be flexible, adjust, work together. And I think if you can bear all of those things in mind, then you can have a really good character creation session, which isn't just rolling dice and 5 people with their heads in books, or 1 person at a time with their head in a book, everyone else looking at their phones. You can have people discussing what they're going to do, what role they're going to play, how they're going to work together, and ultimately, you know, what their collective story is going to start from. And then as you as a DM, you can start to go forward and say, right, I can see this in and that can go like that. As a player, you should be aware that if you put something in your backstory, DMs can use it. Anyway, so I've gone on for a little bit longer than I meant to, but as you can tell, I really love role-playing. But anyway, what I'll do now is I'm just going to sign off. This has been a really interesting conversation about character creation. We're going to go on and do more pieces about role-playing games. We'll go into different areas, building campaigns, all those kinds of things. And really I wanted to put a role-playing based episode out there because we haven't had Pub Play this week. We were it was bank holiday, you know, and family commitments and LARPing and all other things kind of get in the way of that at the bank holiday. So I just wanted to throw something out there, a bit role-playing, and I personally was getting withdrawal symptoms from not talking about role-playing for a week. So I'll just say thanks for watching. I'm Pete, and I will see you in the shed.